Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so in this episode, I thought I'd try to say something about a quote that comes from the German philosopher Martin Heidegger. It's something that he says in his major work, Being and Time. What he says is this. He says, everyone is the other and no one is himself. So what does he mean by this? Okay, well, so according to Heidegger, I think pretty much all of us tend to fall under the sway of what he calls das Man, or as it's translated in English, we tend to fall under the sway of the they. Now, what does that mean? Well, it might help if we look more closely at the expression in German. So, Mann in German doesn't mean man like it does in English. Rather, it means something more like our use of one when we say something like, one shouldn't do that. So, in this way, it's an abstraction. In other words, it's all of us. The idea that we're under the sway of das Man then means that we're being influenced or persuaded to do what one does. That's to say, we talk like one does. We present ourselves the way one is supposed to. We're repulsed by what one is repulsed by, and so on. You get the idea. So, the they is the way of the impersonal public. It's conformity of opinion, conformity of behavior, conformity all the way down. And like I said, Heidegger seems to think that whether we're completely aware of it or not, that we're all living under the authority of the one or the they. Okay, but now, not surprisingly, Heidegger thinks that there's something pretty inauthentic about living this way. It's inauthentic in the sense that we're denying or we're hiding from our unique individual self. We're leveling ourselves down to an abstraction. We're neutering ourselves and our identities. By dissolving into that impersonal entity, into das Man, we're robbing ourselves of our individuality and our freedom. And with it, of course, ultimately, our responsibility. Okay, but now I should qualify a bit though. So I think that Heidegger does say that some conformity and inauthenticity is pretty much unavoidable. Actually, even stronger than this, he says that the inauthentic existence is actually something like our default or primordial condition. And that makes some sense, right? Because obviously we live in a social world with normalized practices and expectations. So clearly some conformity is expected and even acceptable. But the problem is this. The problem is when we surrender to conformity completely and never take a stand for ourselves. It's when we absolve ourselves of every decision that we should make for ourselves personally and instead take up what others do and say. When that happens, we're not ourselves at all. No, what's happened is that we've become the one, the they. Okay, now what's the way out of this for Heidegger? How do we live more authentically? Well, I think part of the solution involves actually seeing and facing up to the fact that the worlds that we live in are largely constructed by the opinions and the interpretations of the they. And as such, realizing that those worlds don't have to be exactly that way. And actually, that they could be altogether different. Okay, but here's the thing. To face up to this, that things could be altogether different, isn't easy. In fact, such a recognition is really scary. Actually, scary or fearful is probably the wrong word to use here. I think Heidegger more aptly characterizes it as the initial experience of angst or anxiety. Okay, so, well, what's angst in this context? Well, angst is basically the feeling of everything seeming to lose its importance. Or maybe better yet, of everyday familiarity collapsing all around you. And when does this feeling or mood hit us? Well, like I said, it happens when we get a brief intimation of a freedom from the world. A freedom from the they that up until now dictated the boundaries of our vision. Now again, this freedom isn't easy for most of us to deal with. Most of us want to avoid the angst that comes with it, of course. Actually, I think Heidegger might say that most of us find it so difficult that we'd rather return to the familiar and the secure. We'd rather return to the authority of the they. And that's what usually happens, I think. But here's the thing. For some of us, angst is not something we want to hide from. And that's because we recognize it as an invitation and as a kind of disclosure of sorts. And as uncomfortable as it is, we know what it's trying to disclose to us. It's trying to tell us that a different world of meaning is open to us to forge. I think Heidegger would say that this is the reward for those who don't turn back when they've left their home. Namely, an authentic existence and a coming into one's own most being. Bye for now.